What was your take on the game last night for the Maple Leafs?
I thought that it was a hard-fought, tight game. I mean, you look at Florida. Obviously, they're missing few key pieces with Barkov and Kachuk and Ekblad. But to me, the way that Florida plays, like that's what you're going to see, right? They'll squeeze you defensively. There's not a lot of ice. They contest every piece of ice, and I thought that the Leafs stuck with their game plan. And a lot of times, where in years past, especially during the regular season, we've seen them maybe try and open the game up instead of sticking with it. So it was a good game. I thought the goalies played well. I thought Stolarz made a couple big saves at the right time, which you can ask of your goaltender. And you got the timely scoring. I mean, they break the game open in the third period with a couple great plays, winning a loose puck battle in the offensive zone, getting it to Marner in, that quiet area. And then the pass to Nyes was a beauty. I mean, that goes over a couple sticks through a lane, and Nyes gets in. And yeah, listen, it hits the post, it goes off Bobrovsky in the net, but you don't ask how when it's in the back of the net. So it was a good fought game. They stuck with their game plan, and what they needed to was to show that they could at least beat them, in the regular season, because now you're 1-2 and you got them one more time, I believe, right? They've got them one more time down in Florida. So, it was a good game, and they were able to kind of, take advantage of a team in a back-to-back situation and, missing some of their top players.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Anthony Stolarz, Noodles. People have been talking in this market, Wool or Stoley did last night. I mean, I thought there were some timely saves where the Maple Leafs in the past just wouldn't have got those couple of saves. And obviously that's the difference maker against his former team, no less. He's got the most wins he's got in his career now. Did he step forward in your mind last night?
Yeah, he did. And, the only thing that concerns me, and I don't think it's the right word to use, but I'll just use it, is that was his 29th start. So it's the 30th appearance last night, which is a career high. So, when you're looking at a team, if you want a team to go deep in the playoffs and play 20-some games in a row every second day, that everything's going to be uncharted territory for both of these goaltenders. So will they hold up? I mean, I don't know. I think they can. I think Stolarz is being 6'6" and 220 pounds and a big, strong goaltender who, a lot of times goalies, as they get older, they get stronger between the ears. And to me, Stolarz on this big stage hasn't been overwhelmed. But again, it's 30 games. We'll see if, by the end, it's probably going to get to 33, 34. What do they got left? 8 games?
7.
So he's probably going to play 4 or 5 of them. So, I mean, I know they got it back-to-back, but I think in the end, if he gets to 34, 35 games, that's the most in his career, but it's more about settling in when you're playing every second day. And Joseph Woll hasn't done anything to kind of strip himself out of that conversation. It's just, I don't know what you guys make of what Craig Berube's comments were yesterday, him saying, well, I've never had the 2 goalie system. So, he was kind of messing with the media a little bit, but in the end, I think, Craig would probably lean towards going with one guy and seeing if he can get hot and ride him type of thing.
Yeah, I think the gamesmanship firmly underway with the Stanley Cup playoffs just a couple weeks away, and he knows people are watching, Ottawa specifically. But is this the most comfortable? When's the last time you felt this comfortable about the Maple Leafs crease? Because we were talking about this earlier. I don't even think about the goaltending entering a game, which is great news.
You know what's weird is Jack Campbell made the All-Star team. So did Freddie Anderson.
Yeah.
Back-to-back, if you look at it, back-to-back seasons, because I know Steve Briere pretty well, the goalie coach. It's not that I looked at the goaltending and was like, because in those years, there wasn't a problem during the regular season. You were like, okay, like Jack Campbell's on the All-Star game, and same thing, Freddie Anderson was, setting career highs and wins and stuff like that. So you're kind of like, I looked at it differently because I think what you're talking about is having 2 guys at the same time that you can rely on, which we haven't seen that. We've seen one guy make the All-Star team, and then afterwards it's a question mark. What's going on with this guy? What's going on with that? And you're looking at depth. I think from a comfort standpoint, that's more what people are looking at is on any given night, you can get good goaltending because you've seen it all season long. There hasn't really been a huge dip. There's been a few pockets here where, when the team has struggled, they've struggled and vice versa. But I think that's where, from a comfort level, I've seen good goaltending with the Leafs. I just haven't seen the tandem be, having that type of strength being, near the top of the league, goals saved above expectation, all of that type of stuff, the numbers, everything kind of matching. So I think it's just different, but there is a level of comfort that knowing whoever's in between the pipes, you expect them to play well. You're not hoping they play well.
So what would you do? You mentioned you think Stoli will play maybe 5 out of the last 7. Berube mentioned he hasn't really had this before. What do you do? Do you kind of lead with Stoli and play it by ear?
I think it's hard because we've had this conversation, and it's, it goes back to anything. When, NFL, if you have 2 starting quarterbacks, you don't have one because you're always looking at the other guy and going, if there's a loss, what happens? Well, you got to go to the other guy. But what if it's unbelievable for a goaltender, 50 save performance, and you lose in triple overtime, 1-0? What do you do? Like, that's the biggest challenge. We saw Boston toy with it last year, right? And Montgomery was playing coy and going, hey, we got a plan in place going into it. And then it didn't matter. Swayman plays great. You're going to Allmark, and then they lose. And you go back to Swayman, they end up sticking with him. But I think the biggest thing is you can have a plan. Jay, you can speak to this. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Like that's that's the saying, right? You've got a plan until you get bopped in the nose. They do have a plan. I don't know what it is, but I think they have an adjustment plan as well. Going, hey, that comes back to what I was talking about. We believe both guys can do it. I'll give an example. The Edmonton Oilers went to the finals last year. Calvin Pickard picked up, a win and a loss, but in the middle of that, was wedged in some inconsistent play from Stuart Skinner. So they needed both to get to where they got to, and they still fell short. This isn't a team that has Vasilevsky, has Bobrovsky, has Hellebuck. You look at, has Shesterkin, has Sorokin, guys who play 55 to 60 games. That's what starters do. Well, I just talked about it. That was Anthony Stolarz' 29th start last night. So, he's going to get to 33, 34 starts in a season. So there is going to be adjustment. We are heading into uncharted territory. Does it make it scary? Yes, because you don't know. That's the only thing. Like when people ask me, well, who has the advantage in net? Well, I see a sample size, whoever they face, whether it's Ottawa, we've at least seen Allmark be more of a starter this season, but has won playoff games. We've seen Vasilevsky win a Conn Smythe and Cups multiple. We've seen Bobrovsky last year. I think he was probably the runner-up to McDavid for the Conn Smythe, but he won the Stanley Cup and got it done. So we've seen the sample size for the guys that they're going to play against. We just haven't seen those guys, and I'm talking Stolarz and Wall. Wall's got 4 playoff starts. Stolarz is tied with both of you. I actually have a playoff start, which is crazy. I mean, that's another side story. But I've got 1 and a couple appearances. But in the end, you don't know until you go through the process. So they're going to go through the process, and you hope that they hold up, which I believe they will. There's no reason to believe they won't. But everything's going to have a first, and this will be their first.
Yeah, this is really not a hot take. I think we're going to see both guys in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I put more stock in the guy who finishes than actually starts a series. So we'll see on that front. But a lot of positives to grab, I think, from this Florida game. Matthews and Marner showing up at an important time was big for me. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be important. Those guys are going to be. We can talk about how much we love Steven Lorentz and guys who bring everything every night and loved and physical and all of that type of stuff, and love Chris Tanev and what he brings to the table. In the end, we know this is a star-driven league, and yes, it might get to a game 7, and we've seen it in history. It's a Stefan Matteau scores a big goal, an OT goal, or somebody like that. But the guys who got Stefan Matteau to that situation was Mark Messier. And you look at it with the Toronto Maple Leafs, they'll go as far as how their big boys play. And, in a big game, which, again, Florida didn't have the matchup with Barkov, so there is a little bit of a discount there. But you play the games, and that's not their fault. I thought Matthews' line was fantastic last night. They were heavy. They needed to do what they needed to do, and they took control of the game when it was important. A close game going to the third period, you got to lean on a team in your own building that played the night before, and they did that, and they were able to expose it.
If you look at the Leafs bottom six and their depth, the Holmbergs and Robertsons and Yarncroaks, you think Pacioretty, we haven't seen him in a little bit. You think he's going to come in and play? You think they'll have a solid bottom six, or are all those guys interchangeable and going to continue to be?
Well, they're interchangeable until you find one line that has something. And that's, you're seeing, with McMahon going up now you're seeing a little bit more stability in that bottom sixes. And what I mean is stability as guys who are going to be in that bottom six, not just injury. And now you start moving them around. Pacioretty would be interesting if you could get him somewhat up to speed. It's tough for a guy that age to jump on a moving train after not playing for so long. But if you could somehow, if he could harness the way he was playing at the start of the year, that's another factor because he's a heavy player. And I like heavy players. So I like guys who can skate and can be physical. Robertson is a guy who can score and found a little bit of magic, but there's times where, he gets overwhelmed physically. That's just his size, right? Yarncroak is an interesting one because I think he's interchangeable. He's like a Swiss Army knife. He can play a lot of different situations. He's got some speed. He's got some smarts. But you're right. Like, I think the bottom six is they've got to find how they want to deploy it. Obviously, Lawton is their three as far as centerman. And then if you're going to put Domi in there, if they could find something with, Lawton, Domi, and then you throw a Holmberg or somebody in there with some speed, some skill, some bite. Now, all of a sudden, you're going up against other third lines. I'm doing the Tampa game tonight, and I think the third line is Bjorkstrand, Gord, and Gonsalves. I mean, Gonsalves is a good, young, skilled player, but Gord, you know what he brings, right? Like, he's a bastard to play against. Bjorkstrand is heavy. He can shoot the puck. So, you start looking. That's a Tampa case scenario. I don't have Florida's roster right in front of me, but that's who you're matching up against. That's who you have to do. I do the old Daryl Sutter. He would do the whiteboards before the game. He would say, do your matchup. Third line, our third line's got to be better than their third line. And, that's where you do that matchup and you lay players on top of each other and say, okay, can Pontus Holberg be better than Oliver Bjorkstrand? That's the matchup, because really up the lineup, there might be Matthews might cancel off Point and vice versa in a series where it's like, okay, who's going to be the difference? So on a different night, it'll be star players, but for the most part, it might be your depth that challenges or your goaltender or something else. So that's why I love going to the whiteboard and just looking at depth charts and how they match up.
Noodles, I can't get over this John Tavares story. First in the NHL in goals since the Four Nations, got 15. Is he almost like an auto re-sign for you at this point? Has your sort of opinion overall wavered on JT throughout the season here?
He's shooting 20%, isn't he? I feel like every time he gets the puck, he scores. So that I worry that. I mean, listen, I love him, and I don't think there's a weakness to his game. He's never been a burner, right? So it's never, his skating will always be, he has what I call work to skate. He's not an effortless skater. He's just a guy who's a strong skater, but he has to work. My biggest concern, yes, auto re-sign, sure, but at what number and what term? Because I'm around the league a lot, and you talk to managers, you talk to coaches and stuff. There are players, but the biggest challenge, and we say this all the time, I'm sure you guys say it too, Father Time is undefeated. So, okay, will he slow down like Crosby slowed down? I don't think, nobody's slowing down like Crosby because he's still a point-a-game guy. But maybe Malkin, like, does he slow down? And when does that slowdown come? And that's where I think the biggest calculated move has to be made. And I know the cap's going up, so you are going to have a lot more flexibility. We had Doug Armstrong on our show yesterday. I thought he made a great point. Because it was a flat cap, managers had to really be mindful of what they were spending. Not saying you don't have to be, but there might be more flexibility moving forward with the cap going up. And if you've got some value contracts, then you might be able to have an overpay here or there, or a situation where you do have some contracts that, are not living up to value. But I look at him, and it's a great story. You think of how this could have gone at the start of the season, where captaincy not his. He could have easily, put his tail between his legs and had the lip going and pouted and been disruptive. And I think we all know that's not John Tavares' character whatsoever. it was just the right time to give Austin the reins and make it his team and make some of those guys at the top of the roster responsible for this team. So it's been a great fit. I think it's an automatic sign if the numbers fit. But again, I look at, I'm 5 o'clock. I'm going to talk to John Cooper today, and I'll see Julian Brisebois. And it was Stamkos for Gensel. You know what I mean? It was a ballsy move, but that's a legacy player that they moved past. And, so far it's been a pretty seamless transition. I think you can't fall in love with players. You have to take a look at how they fit moving forward. Tavares so fit, it's just a matter of what the money and term is.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.